First entry. We were brought here by the military. Me, 2 men, and 1 woman. I was in no condition to resist. Any attempts to break free were suppressed by the huge dose of psychotropic drugs I had been dosed with at the clinic. We were immediately placed in rooms, which were equipped as solitary cells, where the only source of light was a dim red bulb, securely covered by a steel lattice lampshade. There were no windows in the cell. The gray concrete walls were roughly finished and damp and depressing. The heavy steel door, painted dark green, was despairing. In the left corner of the cell, there was a metal bed with legs bolted to the floor. To the right, a rusty toilet paled in color. There was no sink, no table, and no other objects in the cell. I was carelessly dragged in and thrown to the floor. The door slammed shut, and I was left alone. I lay still for a long time, listening to my own wheezing breath. I was unable to imagine why I had been brought here, and what they were going to do to me and the others. I shuddered, feeling an indescribable primal fear. Any attempt to think logically collapsed under the influence of the powerful drug, and every clearing of consciousness was accompanied by a sharp headache. I seemed to spend an eternity like that before I regained consciousness. I felt like a wild animal trapped in a cage. There were traces of dried blood on my hospital clothes. My skin was glossy with bruises and abrasions. I tried to get to my feet several times, but my body wouldn't listen. Again and again I fell to the cold and musty-smelling floor. My mouth gave a low moan, and tears of despair rolled from my eyes. Finally, I found the strength to get up and crawl to the bed. When I collapsed on it and felt the soft mattress under me, though damp, I passed out instantly. I had unbearable nightmares for a long time, and I must have screamed in my sleep. When I finally woke up, all my clothes were wet with sweat. I had long ago lost track of time within these walls. My internal clock had stopped the moment the door slammed shut behind me. Under the mattress, I found a small old notebook and a scrap of pencil which helped me make this entry. I decided to write down everything that would happen to me, hoping that it would go some way to helping me figure out what this place was and why I was here. Second entry. I was once a patient at a closed psychiatric clinic for the hopelessly ill. The clinic was located in the suburbs and was hidden away in a small spruce forest. Here I was persistently treated for the obsessive hallucinations that had plagued me since childhood. All the psychotic people who were suddenly considered dangerous by society for various reasons were taken here. I was one of those dangerous. I was placed here after I had brutally murdered my mother in a severe hallucinatory delirium and then dismembered her body. That was the claim of the police, who arrived to the commotion and found me at the scene of the murder. I myself still do not remember anything from that horrible evening. Later, a forensic psychiatric examination declared me insane and committed me to this clinic. Here I was given all kinds of drugs, and at night I was tied to the bed. I never tried to resist, knowing full well that I was seriously ill. What I feared more than anything was that I might do something horrible again when I lost control. The medication was clearly doing me good. The hallucinations had all but stopped. My mind was slowly regaining consciousness. I was allowed rare walks around the grounds, during which I sometimes managed to talk to some of the nursing staff. I stayed in the clinic for about a year. One night, 2 sturdy orderlies came into my room. They woke me up and ordered me to go with them to the office of the chief physician. When they came out into the corridor, one of them took out a 3-edged key and opened the door leading to the stairwell. We went upstairs where there were several other doors and entered one of them. This was the office, but the head doctor was not in it. Instead, I was met by 4 armed men in military uniforms. Their faces were hidden by balaclavas. The orderlies forcibly put me down on a chair and, without saying a word, left. I was confused by what was happening and simply could not string a few words together. One of the soldiers came up to me and started shining something red in my face. The other 2 immediately grabbed my arms. I jerked in an unsuccessful attempt to break free. Their trained steel grip held me like a vice. The fourth soldier came up behind me and with a sharp blow plunged a syringe into my neck. The needle hit the carotid artery. At the same moment, the whole world spun around me and I lost consciousness. Delusional, intrusive dreams enveloped my exhausted brain. I woke up in the van of some truck filled with reddish fog. 3 other bodies lay next to me, 2 men and a woman. They were wearing the same hospital clothes as me. All of them were senseless. They had probably been injected too. The van shuddered and rocked. I could hear the engine running dynamically. We were being driven somewhere. I looked around for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Then my mind went blank again, and the next events came back to me like a dream. The open doors of the van, a sharp red spotlight shining directly into my eyes. The soldiers pull us out. They clasp my hands and lead me down long corridors. Next is an open cell door and a painful fall to the floor. During all this time, the military did not utter a single word. I heard no commands or orders. They were definitely acting according to one well-coordinated, practiced scheme. An icy terror grips me. This place seems unreal. It's like the nightmare of a maniac mad with murder and blood. The third tape. I thought the glow of the red light bulb above the door intensified. Now when I get out of bed, my body casts an ominous shadow. I wonder how long I've been here. A day or two. I'm terribly thirsty. Sometimes I hear a strange man-made hum, like a giant engine running. It's coming from somewhere below. When it happens, the floor vibrates faintly. After a while it subsides, then it happens again. The thought slips through my mind that perhaps I have died and am now in some kind of purgatory. But rare flashes of lucidity drove that delusion away from me. I must calm down and get some sleep. Fourth entry. I have just experienced one of the most monstrous hallucinations of my life. I was awakened by a strange noise. It was coming from the door. There was a desperate scrabbling on the outside, pounding with 1,000 tiny paws. I listened. It didn't stop. On the contrary, the door wasn't just scraping anymore, it was almost drumming. Something was pounding and scratching at the dilapidated paint with thin claws. A nasty chill ran down my spine. I huddled in the corner of the bed, terrified, and kept my eyes on the door, listening, trying to understand the nature of the inhuman sounds. Meanwhile, the light of the red lamp grew brighter. It quickly filled the space and became so bright that it was impossible to stay with my eyes open. Closing my eyes, I trembled with fear. The blows on the door became more and more violent and insistent. It felt like it was being battered down with a battering ram. Even the blank concrete walls shook in time with them. The technogenic hum I mentioned earlier also intensified. Now it was louder than ever, like the roar of some alien monster. Sound and light intertwined in an ugly coitus, creating something that was completely beyond the ordinary concepts of life. Something that could only be felt with a hidden sixth sense, when the whole body was paralyzed by an inexplicable terror that stole from the depths of the otherworldly universe. My fear turned to despair. Unable to bear it any longer, I let out a long scream. At the same second, everything went silent. A deafening silence swallowed up the sounds. The light faded to nothing. I wrapped my arms around my head and froze in place. Everything disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared. I could still see the acrid glare in front of my eyes, as if I'd been staring at the welding for a long time. My ears buzzed with the rush of blood, and my body shook and trembled. Suddenly, an unbearable feeling of nausea came over me. I pushed myself to the side and let out a powerful, bitter stream. Immediately, a new wave of fear, now joined by disgust, curbed me. I saw a huge white centipede swarming in the puddle of my vomit. Fifth entry. I was lying on the floor when they suddenly opened the door. I didn't hear the lock open or the door creak. There were 4 of them again. and their faces were still hidden by their balaclavas. I recognized them immediately. They were the same people who had picked me up from the clinic. It's hard to confuse them with anyone else. Same height, angular body movements. Even the stains on their camouflage were in the same places. Like they'd been printed on a printer, they looked like soldiers from old video games. I decided then that they must be some sort of personalized convoy of mine. Just like last time, they blinded my face with a red glow. They then walked over to me, threw me to the floor, and forcefully ripped off my hospital pajamas. When I noticed that the military man was holding a thin scalpel, I screamed and started to break free. A fight broke out. I dodged as best I could, cursing them with every curse I could think of. They tried to grab me by my limbs, keeping their silence. In agony, I grabbed one of them in the head and pulled off his balaclava. When I saw his face, I was paralyzed with horror. Even a second of what I saw was enough to realize that it was not human. A completely white, slippery head and face with no curves and no hair. It had no ears, nose, or lips either. Only shiny black eyes stared fixedly at me. A strip of mouth opened arbitrarily, exposing small pointed teeth. This just can't be, I thought in those eerie moments. This must be just another hallucination. My brain refused to realize the obvious. But then the creatures started kicking me, and I felt a very real pain. When I pulled myself together and shook the creatures off, I suddenly managed to get to my feet. When I saw the door open, I rushed out, leaving the horror behind me. I ran down the long, unlit hallway, exhausted and dehydrated. My legs were shaking. I stumbled and fell more than once. Then I got up again and continued my escape with all my might. There was a light at the end of the corridor, a red and warm light. I had no idea what awaited me there. Apparently succumbing to my ancient instincts, I unconsciously ran toward the source of the light. As I got closer, I realized that it was just another cell, which was obviously occupied by someone else as well. The exact same cell as the one I was being held in. The door was open, and its light flooded part of the hallway. I hesitantly stepped inside. I saw a body sprawled on the bed in the corner. I went over to him. It was a man, one of the men I had been brought here with. The man was dead. On his face I saw the first signs of decomposition. He had died with his eyes open, in which, frozen, shone an unspeakable horror. In his mouth I noticed a faint movement. His lips parted, and a hideously slippery centipede appeared. It crawled out quickly, arcing around the left side of his face and disappearing into the back of his head. I recoiled in disgust. Only now did I notice that his whole body was crawling with them. Centipedes crawled up his arms, crawled under his clothes, and wriggled out into the light. They were falling off the bed, continuing their route across the floor. I wanted to leave the place as quickly as possible, but no sooner had I taken a step than something of great strength came at me from behind, and at the same moment I felt a prick in my neck. My consciousness blacked out before I could hit the floor. The last entry. This is most likely my last entry. I was returned to my cell before I became conscious of what was happening. I was once again tormented by nightmares until I was awakened by footsteps outside the door, mixed with a man's voice. The man was desperately yelling something about not wanting to be eaten alive, making incoherent pleas for mercy. They passed by my cell, and then there were only fragments of echoes. I had already resigned myself to the fact that I would not get out of here alive. The only thing that matters to me now is that I hope this diary will someday fall into the right hands, and maybe what's happening here will one day end, and no one will ever be trapped inside these walls again. Now I'm going to try to describe one moment that might shed some light on what's going on here. As I was being returned to my cell, at some point I must have been dropped. From the impact with the floor, I regained consciousness for a split second and had time to look at the place through which I was being dragged. It was a small hall filled with red mist, in the center of which stood a rectangular table. On one side of this table sat people in black suits and gas masks. On the other, the same creatures that had dragged me into the chamber. They were unclothed, and their appearance resembled huge anthropomorphic centipedes. They sat at the table without making a single sound. And at that moment, by some previously unavailable levels of subconsciousness, I suddenly realized everything. It was as if some divine revelation had appeared in front of me, quickly putting everything in its place. I realized that my hallucinations were not a disease, and that people in general were not prone to such ailments. All this darkness, madness, schizophrenia, and visions are projected into our brains by these vile aliens. Their waves, like an infernal spider, weave all over the earth. That's how they control people, and the world's entire medical psychiatric system is in secret collusion with them. They bring people here to feed them to their offspring. The whitish alien larvae eat human flesh to grow and develop. I'm here as food too. Apparently some facet of the brain's sense of self-preservation breaks down when you realize you're destined to become someone's lunch. Right now, I don't care at all. My fear has evaporated, and I take it for granted. Outside the door, I hear a woman screaming. They'll be coming for me soon. I have to hide this journal before it's too late. The last thing I want to write about is that no matter what state I'm in, I couldn't have killed my own mother. I had always suspected that an outsider had done it by subjugating my mind. My suspicions have finally been confirmed, and now my conscience is clear. Farewell. I was given this diary by my fellow stalkers who wished to remain anonymous. They found the diary in one of the abandoned bomb shelters located in the northern part of the country. To the material they attached the exact coordinates of this place. I searched for information on the internet and found only a couple of notes that this object was built in the late 80s and immediately abandoned for unknown reasons. Without thinking long, I decided to do my own investigation. Tomorrow morning I'm going there. I can't imagine what might be waiting for me in this place. But my unquenchable explorer spirit has once again triumphed over common sense, and I'm getting ready to hit the road. I've also asked my wife to publicize this text if I don't return.